Hi everybody, so I'm just going to do this quick tutorial about setting up your After Effects workspace so that you can produce some layered video for this Project Osprey layered thing that I'm doing. So I thought I'd just take you through it. Now I'm aware that my creaky old Mac, when I've done these screen grabs last time, it doesn't always capture every frame, so it's not always obvious what I'm clicking on. So I'm going to try and go a bit slower this time. But if there is anything that's not clear, do just let me know and I'll try and explain it. So as before, then. I'm using an older version of After Effects just because it's a 2009 iMac and it seems to run better on this older version of After Effects than the one I bought at the time, than the one that you'll be working on. So yours will look very different to this one. Well, not very different. It'll look, a bit different, but it'll basically work in the same way. So what we need to do is we need to work out a way of partitioning our standard 1080 video into four equal parts. So this is how I've sort of decided to do it myself. You might come up with a better way, I don't know, but this is how I recommend you give it a go. So I'm going to go to new composition first of all. I'm going to make sure that my resolution is 1920 by 1080 pixels. Okay, so that's the standard HD video template. So that's in your sort of 16:9 aspect ratio. So that's just normal video. And what I'm going to do is just make sure that square pixels is turned on because we are going to be rotating a lot of things within this composition, and so you just want to make sure that when we start mucking around with these things that's all okay. And I've set mine to 30 frames per second just because I've been shooting on my iPhone and my iPhone shoots in 30 frames per second, so that's just standard. Okay, so I'm also going to just change my background color to black, although I suspect that it's going to come up with a transparent background anyway, because for some reason it does that. Right, anyway, not for some reason, I just mean I haven't changed the settings. I'll show you how I'm doing it now. So, turn off that render queue. The thing that I just clicked there, that was the render queue from a previous project. You don't need to worry about that for now. Okay, so what we've got then, this is our standard 1080 video template. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm first of all going to go up to layer at the top here, and I'm going to go to new and solid, and I'm going to make that solid black. The reason for this is everything in the background of this video, apart from maybe the back layer, should be black, because then it won't appear on the, because obviously black pixels on a screen are just pixels that aren't being illuminated at that point. So because what we're doing is we're using a series of screens to mirror different bits of the image, any black pixels won't show up on those layers. Because effectively what you're looking at right here, I know this seems peculiar, but what you're looking at right here, this square on your screen, is a series of pixels that are completely turned off at this stage. So what you're actually looking at there is the screen itself. So you're actually physically looking at the screen here. This bit, these are pixels that are turned on. So these are all pixels that are being asked to kind of display a grey tone at this stage. But these are pixels which are turned off. And because they've turned off, there's no illumination attached to them. Consequently, they don't show up on the reflected screens in my viewer in the same way. So that's why everything that's going to be on a foreground layer, at least, in the viewer, as I shall hopefully explain, needs to be on a black background so that it sort of stands out. Okay, so how are we going to partition our screen into four equal bits? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to layer, I'm going to go and make another solid, okay, and I'm going to make this one, doesn't matter what colour it is because we're going to get rid of it in a minute, so I'm going to make this one red, okay. So now we've got a black solid and a red solid, okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to open up the properties of the red solid. So down here in the corner, this is our the sort of clip manager aspect of After Effects. I'll bring this up so you can see it a bit better. And using this little triangle here, now yours won't be a full triangle, yours will be two lines, but it's the same thing. It's just a design issue. You just open up that little triangle there, and then open up this transform. What I'm going to do is come to scale, highlight that, and I'm going to scale this down to 50%. Okay, so I know that this is precisely half the size of the video. The reason why I'm doing this is then I can move this to one side like so. So by clicking on the position, I can drag it to one side, like that. And there we go. Now I know precisely where the halfway mark of my video is in terms of this screen, because this, I know this is half the size, and so by putting it halfway, I now know that that is, let me just make sure I can zoom in. Remember to hold down the space bar if you want to move. Yeah, so that's not overlapping the edge at all. So I know that this is exactly on the halfway mark then, this line, okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up to Layer and another new solid, okay, and this solid is going to be white. It doesn't really matter because we're going to turn these off at the end anyway, okay? They're just guidelines for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up on this little tab here, and I'm going to just drag it and drag it and drag it and drag it and drag it. Now, you might have thought, well, I didn't need to do that because if I dragged it, then I'm going to get the same. Okay, that's it. I mean, if I drag it, it's going to be exactly halfway. And look, it's lined up perfectly, isn't it? So that's the halfway mark. That's fine. But the reason why I showed you that in principle was to then give you that same understanding so that when we then make that even smaller to get the quarter sizes, then it makes sense, hopefully. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my red solid. I'm going to go back to scale, and I'm going to type 25% and hit that. And now that's a quarter of the size of the overall video. And again, if I drag that positionally over to the side of the screen, like so, that should just about do it. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't need to be hyper accurate because I don't know how good my building skills were on the viewer anyway. This is just a kind of like a guide. But anyway, there we are. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to come onto my white solid. And if you're on a Mac, you can hit Command D to duplicate that. I think on a PC it's Control D. And now I've got two white solids, and what I can do is make sure you don't grab the tabs, make sure you just grab the solid, pick it up, and you can just move it over to here and just line it up with the edge of that red solid that we've just made. Okay, so I can zoom that in, and if I want to, I can open up the properties for my white solid like that, transform, and I can change the position if I want to be really precise about it. I'm not going to be super precise though, because there we go. As I say, I don't think I've built the viewer as precisely as I could have done. What I'm going to do now then is I've still got my quarter size red solid here, and I'm going to go to position down on that, and I'm going to drag it this way. There we go. That's it. There we go. And finally, I'm going to duplicate the middle white solid again, so I don't have to drag it so far. There we go. So that was Command D again to duplicate the white solid. I'm going to drag it this way. Then, there we go. So now all I need to do is come down to the red solid, and I can either just turn off the eye here, or what I'm going to do, just because I prefer to have it uncluttered, is I'm just going to hit backspace on my keyboard, and that's going to get rid of that. And now I've got my image partitioned into 4 equal parts. So then I'm just going to use these as guides. Like I say, at the end I'm going to just turn these off so I don't see them any longer. They're just guides just to allow me to see where I need to position the elements of my scene. And so to show you something that I was working on earlier, if I open recent project, layer comp test, don't save this one. So this is, excuse me. So this is what it will then look like ultimately. So what I've done is I have added in different layers using those guides. So I've got my background layer here. I've got a layer with amplifiers on it and some weird lighting effects. I don't know what they're going to look like. We shall see. I've got my musicians in the sort of medium foreground, and then I've got my singer in the foreground here with some more lights and stuff like that, and we'll see what they do. And you can see that I've got my white solids down here at the bottom. So these are the ones I used as guides. So if I turn all those on, you can see what I did there. So I've got my white lines that I just created. That was my template that I used. So I then brought in all my footage, and what I did was with all of my footage, so let's say, take this image for example of the singer. There we are. All I did was I opened up the properties of this, opened up the transform, And then in rotation, I just went to 270 degrees because that rotates it counterclockwise so that it would fit in here. And then I just scaled it down to fit onto my screen. Okay, so that's what the composition can look like. But of course, you know, the whole idea behind this activity is to make up something for yourselves. So come up with something. So, you know, have a go at putting some bits onto these different layers, send it through and we'll see what we've got. But remember, it seems to work best if you've got more things in the background and fewer things in the foreground. And remember, the things in the foreground need to be ideally on this black background. Otherwise, they're going to just clutter up the layers behind them and we won't be able to see them properly. Okay, so give it a go and show me what you've got.